Welcome to your TV library. Today we will be looking at the subject of trophology and about the scientists who are able to link the importance of eating and nutrition to energy and how that affects work. Trophology is still a relatively new branch of science, which focuses on the balance between nutrition and its relation to metabolic disease. It is common for us today to consciously consider what we consume and that we balance our diets with the right amount of vitamins, protein, starch, fruits and carbohydrates. These considerations, of course, are vital in sustaining our energy to deliver a hard day's work. The key factor to this widespread knowledge that we know today as trophology goes right back to the Industrial Revolution. During the late 18th and 19th century, there were major sociological changes in Europe and throughout North America, causing major social strife during the Industrial Revolution. The consequence of the Industrial Revolution forced industries to find vast amounts of workers to keep up the industry's demands. They could not just consider the materials that they were rapidly producing, but had to consider the workers that produced the materials. This led to careful consideration of the machine that fueled the Industrial Revolution, that being a living machine, the human being. It was during that time that many scientists worked on the theory of how to nourish the human being properly for the purpose of creating a stronger workforce for an army as well as for labourers. One of those scientists was Benjamin Thompson. Benjamin Thompson was born in 1753 and died in 1814. He was an American British-born officer who fought during the American War of Independence on the British side. After his wartime experience, he was shipped back to England in 1782. It was then that he was put on half pay and finally was posted back to Bavaria. There he was hired to conduct reforms on the social and military systems of the country. Many years later, he was granted knighthood for his service to the crown. And finally, he took his post in Munich in 1784. Now let's focus our attention on the years he spent on the reform programme in 1784 to 1788. This was a time when Thompson concentrated on the living conditions of the armed forces in Austria and Prussia and compared them to the conditions of the armed forces in Bavaria. Thompson created a special soup which was designed to sustain energy for workers. Now let's imagine his discoveries. Now we have a lot of hungry mouths to feed. That is why I have 3 aims. Those being, number 1, to stop the discrimination of anyone that wishes to pursue a profession as a soldier. Number 2, to increase the number of troops hired, raise the wages of soldiers without it raising the budget of the Bavarian army. And thirdly, I must help sustain the use of the armed forces to serve even in times of peace. It was this second and third point that led Thompson to being associated with feeding the poor and to his contribution to feeding the masses. This was not a simple task, as he had to find a way of sustaining a large army without increasing the budget of the army. But how did he do this? I have considered the fact that we don't have enough workers, and I have decided to employ Munich's beggars. They are sturdy and strong, and I will take them off the streets and give them all jobs. We can educate them and train them to work, and they too will become self-sustaining. Come, let me show you inside the workhouse kitchen. I have discovered that creating a huge amount of food for all of these workers costs less than preparing individual meals. And that is why these workers will receive a free lunch, 20 ounces of my very own Romford soup. Thompson published and developed various recipes that aimed at cooking for 1,200 portions in one time. To create my very famous Romford soup, you initially create a mixture of pearl barley, beans, salt, vinegar and water. Well, actually that was my early recipe. I've recently refined it, adding sliced bread and potatoes. By modern standards, we know that for a healthy diet, one must consume 2,000 calories per day. This shows clearly that the Romford soups were only efficient in feeding someone at a low cost, which is why the recipe was used for a long time in the soup kitchens by the welfare organisations. But the soups did not provide enough energy for a good day's work. Hence, it failed to fulfil its part in Romford's plan to nourish its workers. Welfare organisations, however, adopted the recipe of Romford soup and used it to support homeless people and those unable to work during the Napoleon War. The Romford soup did help to feed the masses, and during a time of vast industry growth, it focused on fueling the workforce, which was vital. War also brought Romford to the discovery of the importance of nutrition to keep a large army healthy and able to be effective. We now understand a great deal about nutrition and how to keep a well-balanced diet in order to remain healthy, but our informed knowledge today has most certainly arose on the back of much trial and tribulation. And that's all we have time for today, folks. Bye for now.